Yo, we gotta let Will Holmes speak for a little bit. That was a little delay. But we had a full-blown conversation. That's why we're like, let's pause for a second.
Yeah.
We did.
Catch
A
up, bro.
few technical errors, but we're here.
Hey.
Live.
The soundboard is hating. They don't want us to be great. But,
Yeah.
we'll get it next time. We'll get it.
We'll get it.
Hey, folks. Welcome to I'm Not Supposed to Be Here.
I'm not supposed to be
Yeah. I am one of your hosts, Trent L. Dixon. I'm here with my main man.
If you've been listening, you know.
Skip the intro.
Lucas MG.
Boom,
Lucas
boom, boom,
MG.
boom, LMG. Hello. Nah.
And I'm
Soundboard
2
Pro.
of 3 to make this circle hole last,
Right.
but
We got-
certainly not least.
We got
have
Christian,
Liz.
Felix. We got Eclectic Sage.
Eclectic Sage.
I'm loving it. Now I'd be like, I'm a rapper now.
this.
Out here
finally
sprinkling
embracing it.
magic on people.
This podcast is brought to you by
Celsius.
Not really.
That's gonna be the running joke. Like,
Man, imagine if one of our listeners just happened to be like the PR guy.
yo,
for
that'd be
Celsius.
fire.
I'd like to
He's sick as fuck.
just
I
have
would
to
so endorse
sponsor your
him.
podcast.
I would so. Yo, actually, Christian, you might be our guy. They're out of Boca Raton,
Oh, hey.
Florida.
Hey.
You know, I was reading on this, and like, so I work with an unnamed individual who is just a little know-it-all. And
Oh, no.
what do you call somebody that's just like a know-it-all? Because I feel like that's a playground
Other than a know-it-all.
slander.
Other than know it.
Yeah, like I don't
wise
know.
guy.
Maybe a
examples I
wise
think
guy.
of are
Okay,
negative.
so like it's either the playground or like an old Italian man. You think you're a wise guy, huh?
Wise guy, eh?
Anyways,
You're wise.
get back to me next EP on what type of adjective you can apply to somebody who's a know-it-all. But anyways, these are halfway decent for you, Celsius.
Yeah.
0 sugar. It's kosher,
A lot of those
How do you
say
make a drink
zero
kosher?
sugar, and I'll be like, yo, this tastes like all
but
sugar.
it's so good. Anyways,
No sugar, all aspartame.
oh my god! But wait, the biggest kick though, is that there's 100%. No, excuse me, 1,000% biotin.
What?
Wait,
1,000%? How you got 1,000%?
I'm not even BSing you. There's biotin 1,000% of your daily value.
Wow.
Let me see that.
Dude, look at it. Freshly cracked.
1,000% of your daily. That has to
Wait,
be worse
where's
than
that
no
at?
sugar.
It's under like the supplemental value or whatever. Anyway, 1,000%. It's like
1,000. I don't
pretty.
understand
Just
how
look
you-
for 1,000. You'll see the biotin next to it.
Yeah.
But
I have
mean,
a joke,
Christian
bro.
did-
That is
Enlighten me.
1,000%. So, oh my god.
Yeah, I have a
I'm
joke,
good
bro.
for
I won't
10
say it on
days.
air in case like they're listening.
I can't say actually what a sponsor.
yeah, because I have a joke about 1,000, but you know,
But I mean, biotin's good for your nails, your hair.
I guess it's like
Yeah.
10 times what you're supposed to get for a daily dosage.
yeah.
Wow, and then I spilled all over myself. First
It's so
step.
good you want to pour it on yourself.
So
Yeah.
there's that.
that's the commercial. Like,
So good. You
it's so good.
Yeah, they endorse us, but we have to drink like 3 cans every episode.
Oh my gosh, just
Hey,
wow, just
you
hair
can
and
have
nails
500
everywhere.
milligrams.
Yeah, it'll be 3,000%.
1,000% hair and nails. Well, then I got sponsors.
Yo,
Crazy.
1,000%
man.
is crazy. I
But
don't-
yeah. So prior to recording here, yeah, we were. I was gonna segue in with perhaps a topic of sorts that I had seen recently. Trent, I know you can relate to this one on me a little bit here, but
what's up?
and I was trying to explain this to some friends at work, and it just like didn't really go through.
It just didn't land.
Yeah, it didn't land exactly. And basically, I was like, so y'all ever end up on them crime pages on IG? And everybody's like, no, not really. But I'm like, damn, I know you.
Yeah,
you know, you were
flashbacks to the
on.
rabbit hole.
You were on old Wild West YouTube. You know,
yeah,
well, we're
anything
talking like
like-
2006, 2007
Yeah,
YouTube.
back in the
Do you
day.
know where your children are?
Anyways.
just wants a finger feed.
Dude, I ran
milk?
into this crime page, and it was just so. There's this guy I used to get weed from, and like he does ex-weed dealer short. Back when you used to buy it from a
I was
person
gonna
and
say,
not from a store.
when it was illegal.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And anyways, this guy like he moved out of the city, so he's not here no more. But he like does like not extreme dirt biking, but he does like the biking like Meek Mill style, you know, when you're like
they
in
arrest
the
you real
streets
quick
and
for that in the city.
The four-wheelers.
So
Yeah,
like
they don't like that.
But he's like specifically dirt bike, but like one hand on the handlebars, and he's like doing a wheelie, and he's like scraping his hand on the ground with the other one. Crazy shit. So I'm
Pretty
flipping
fire
through his
video, though.
story.
I'm not gonna
and
lie.
He's what's that?
I said that's a pretty fire variant, like straight
Yeah.
up weed dealer.
Literally, like. But anyway, so I'm flipping through his story, and he's like, you know, he's like hitting it, whatever.
Yeah.
Keep flipping through, and then like it's just like a fight video, and like my dumbass, of course, I'm like, you know, just like sitting, just
Those
whatever,
fight videos are a
zoned
rabbit
out.
hole.
Yeah,
For
nah.
sure. And it was this page. It was like people are dumb, like 2.0 or something like that was the page.
Okay.
Anyways, and like I just saw this wild compilation of videos. Dude, I saw this video in the Bronx. Maybe we could put link in the script because this shit has stuck with me the last 2 days.
Violence.
But like these two guys were like, or no, it was a huge group of people. These two dudes are duking it out, whatever. They're like jumping this guy for no reason. It's in the Bronx. Actually, the reason I don't know isn't quite said in the comments. But anyways, so they're beating up on this guy. This guy gets up. He like starts to like, oh man, they beat my ass, and like he starts to get away. Out of nowhere, this dude, boom, like comes into frame. Shing, like swings an axe at his leg, bro.
Oh
like,
my
But this
gosh.
guy's like all
An
fumbled,
axe?
an axe, and like he whoop, 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 like does like a Flintstones like scrabble out of there, and like the axe literally just misses his leg.
Oh my gosh.
But like this dumbass that swang the axe, he swang it so hard that like ding, like the thing like flies out of his hand, and like he falls over, and like the guy like literally Scooby-Doo noise like whoop, like flies out of there, and like, but I'm just thinking, I'm like, this man just swung an axe at another man broad daylight, like
Nah.
whatever. So that was just
Shout out to the Bronx. I love the Bronx.
yo, this video was fucking crazy, man. And so anyways, I look more and more into this page, like, although I know I shouldn't, and it's just like crazy videos of like, dude, all of these like Nordstrom in California just getting like, dude, a gang of like 20 to 50 people
Oh my gosh.
run in there, just literally break everything, steal everything in their sight, and it's just like, what is going on? And like,
Yeah.
to me, believe it or not, that story kind of segues into our topic today of good
And
and
evil.
evil,
Okay.
and the nature of such.
And the nature of such. So,
And-
yeah, something to think about.
Man, is that one kind of way to jam in that puzzle piece of the topic? But I mean, I was just watching this shit, and I'm like, I almost feel like I'm like implicated in the crime by watching all this shit.
You made me think, like, what part of that, what part of our brain makes us so interested in seeing crime and things like that? Is it like,
I feel
are we
like it's a taboo. It's because like we know, like we have like a lot of morbid curiosity towards things.
Certainly.
And so like we like, one, we're afraid of the unknown, but we like treading very close to it
It's very true, man.
because
very true.
it's very exhilarating to be close to like death, I guess, in that type of sense, like in relation to it, in the sense that like a lot of times, or like a lot of philosophers over the years have like pondered like our relationship to death and how that informs like our being. So like you look at the void of meaninglessness, and then like how like you live and then you die, but then that meaninglessness is like where you get the existentialism, and then you have like the altruism that could like stem from that, and like the new meaning that you create in life. So, like,
Define altruism again.
so altruism is just like doing stuff for the greater good. It's kind of like utilitarianism, in the sense that like you try to find the maximum benefit of like a thing, but it differs in the sense that like altruism is just like a general sense of wanting to provide and do goodness for others. And then there's different ways. So you could have like they call it selfish altruism. So it's basically like we live in an environment where it's not a zero-sum game. So it's not like if somebody has something, I can't have something. There's so many resources. It's just the amount that you are able to like divvy up. So it's like now we live in a plus sum world. So it's just like, okay, I can selfishly and altruistically give you as much as you can, so that in the future, like if you act in the same way, we'll both end up in a better position. It's basically like an abundance mindset.
Yeah, it all like kind of like a self-fulfilling
self-fulfilling cycle. Like if
yeah.
you're really, really awesome and kind to somebody else, they're just more likely to be awesome and kind to you, and then you build an environment around that and a culture of that.
So what do you think it is, Trent? Because that was like, again, when my initial launch didn't land of like, shall I ever end up there? I was like, that was the following kind of topic.
Thing, right?
It's like, because then I showed them the video. Maybe I shouldn't have, but I did. But but I was we were like, man, like what yeah, I don't know, what is it about us that likes to like kind of have this sense of like voyeuristic like experience of watching something that is like pretty fucking gnarly like that.
I think it's part of what Christian said. Also, I think I've said this before. It's boredom. People are just,
dude.
You want to fill your life with something interesting, and it's kind of like gossip. It's something to.
It
talk
is very
about.
gossipy.
Yeah.
But also, I think it feels, for some people, I think it sort of feels that need to live
like
a little,
experience.
Yeah. Like it's like
Yeah.
experiencing it without experiencing it.
And you also have
like you said, taboo. It's like getting a little taste of the taboo without actually tasting the taboo.
Yeah, and like, I mean, talk about a protective layer of your in between the experience you and then the iPhone in the middle. You know what I mean? Like you have a complete safeguard from actually having
yeah, like the axe is not gonna fly through you to the screen.
Yeah.
But
Dude,
it's
the
like,
way he swung that thing, you would think, man,
yeah,
the way he swung that thing, but
it's kind of like a roller coaster episode.
but that
yeah, that's a bar for sure.
Like
The way he
simulated
swung it.
the way he
violence.
swung that thing. Pause. But yeah, I guess like in all seriousness too, something that like kind of left, that was left with me from that is I'm like, how is this guy really like? I mean, what happened for him to be swinging an axe at a guy ready to take his leg off? Like
how did you expect that to end? Like,
yeah,
if,
exactly.
if it connected.
And it's like, I mean, I don't know if that's particularly like just like a black and white call of like, oh, he's evil or like he's good.
Yeah,
Or he was doing something good in some crazy way. But like, I don't know. And I guess to me, like, again, also just to kind of lead more into our topic is like, I guess
Did
that's
the
kind of a.
have anything?
Oh, it was like completely degenerate. Just like he should have hit him or some shit like that.
Yeah,
like,
but I think that I feel like that is more evil than the act of swinging the axe.
right.
In my
Or like,
opinion.
okay, actually, I'm being like completely facetious. It didn't say
Yeah,
that, but like
no,
something,
but like something along those lines.
you know,
Brought two
like
axes.
like 8 laughing emojis or something just equally as dumb. But anyways, yeah, and I guess like I don't know. Again, to kind of go into the topic, it's like I guess to me a sense of evil kind of seems like doing something that you're not supposed to do, but you still do it anyways. I guess in some kind of broad sense. And was he again? What is that man evil? No, I'd like to presume not. But it's like, I guess by definition, that would almost kind of be a consequence of the action.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, we really have no context to the situation, so it's hard to judge.
That's
But
true.
I mean, I think from a societal standpoint of like what's acceptable and what's not, he'd be considered evil because violence is bad.
Right.
But I mean, how would y'all define good, and then how would y'all define evil? I think that's a good
Christian's leaning in.
like
I know.
a
I'm
good-
excited.
yeah, he's gonna get-
I was loving this.
That's a good foundation,
right?
Yeah.
So
what would you say, Sir Sage?
I think, so for context, for the last semester that I was in school and everything, I took like a metaphysics class, and it was talking about like philosophers and how metaphysics is basically like the study of our relationship to existence, right? So it talks about like a lot of this is kind of like juggling like goodness and a lot of stuff that we talk about like just generally like on this podcast, and a lot of it is just like the concept of like oneness and being, in the sense that everything is like one, and that like time is kind of like one of the philosophers blanking on his name, but Aristotle kind of uses it in the sense that like there's an immovable object or like the unstoppable mover that like creates things and then is basically like a layer of contradiction, and then that kind of contradiction creates everything in the sense that everything's one.
That's crazy because that literally like described what you said of Kanye West like prior to recording.
Yeah, no, it's
About
just like a reflection.
literally like the creator, and he's a gigantic contradiction. And
Yeah.
like by in his like wave of wake is like what everybody kind of feeds off of.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I
sorry,
feel like
continue.
No. I feel like as artists, you're like a microcosm of contradictions in yourself, and every time you create something, it's kind of like that. And good and evil is, I feel like evil doesn't exist in the same way. It's just the lack of something. So like good is the fullness of something, and evil is the lack of something. So good is the fullness of love and care. Evil will be the lack of attention to detail, lack of care, lack of empathy, lack of this in relationship to something. Because evil can't be an object. So like if you're looking at it computer code, it'll be like if you're looking at a binary, 1 would be good, 0 would be evil because it's a null value, and then you have a neutral value which is in between, and then everything is kind of coded in between, like a 3-letter language. You have everything kind of coded in between, so it's either yes, no, or switch.
So that seems to bring about a striking conclusion immediately, at least to me, that would be that good is the foundation.
Yeah, because everything is kind of created in goodness.
Wow.
I would assume.
That's pretty profound.
That's a
Trent's eyebrows are up.
that is a very. I had another word.
It's a hot take.
No, I agree with it. I
Shouts
never
out
really
to the
thought
hot
of it
take.
that way, but I agree.
That is a very positive way of looking at it, I would say.
Yeah, because even
Where-
every evil act is a good act. It's just a corruption of it.
Well,
It's a
Wait, say
corrupt.
that again?
Every evil act is a good act, but it's corrupted.
bars.
What about like the act of killing someone?
The act itself is not, in the eyes of like the universe, like it's not like it lost anything, in the sense that like their energy
Whoa.
is not destroyed. They just come
Whoa.
into a different sense. So the universe looks at it very neutral. We look at it as like a culture.
Yeah.
And so like in our culture, we like we don't, if you're living in a tribal society and all you see is death around you, you make it so that you don't want to see death around you. So you embed it in the cultural teachings and the lessons that you pass down, that murder and violence is bad. But a lot of times like violence and everything may not be physical violence. And I feel like when it comes to like videos and stuff, the reason why we kind of gravitate towards a lot of that is because like it's like the rawest form of violence when we're perceptive to a lot of invisible forms of violence. Whether like I was talking to it with my friend yesterday, like whether it's like anti-homeless architecture, that's a form of violence in the sense that you have different barricades, and it's just like if someone has no place to sleep and you take the one area where they could possibly sleep and you make it so that it's impossible to sleep on that thing, or like putting little barbed wire things so that pigeons can't sit, that's a form of violence. It's kind of like, it's like whenever you have barricades in a military thing, you put stuff on the edges so that people can't over here do that.
Climb over it.
So
Yeah.
basically we do that, but in a more subtle sense.
Yeah.
And that's
Make it-
built into the architecture and the environment, which produces different forms of behaviors. Because now certain forms of behaviors are not like allowed in the space. So to like bring it back, evil in the sense will be kind of architected, and the lack of care will be architected and embedded in the system. So lack of care will be embedded by just having less things. So then when somebody's like freaking out and somebody like has like an outburst, it's like, what are you doing? You're acting contrary to the thing, but they're acting in response to the violence of the environment. And then to bring it back to murder, the murder is just like somebody said it. I forgot, someone in the 60s, I forgot who it was, but they said criminality speaks more to the environment and the timing of society and like where that person existed rather than the individual person. Kind of like when you see like, why did the 60s have so many serial killers? It was just like the environment. Like there's serial killers now, but the environment and the way that coverage of media, news, and everything, they kind of like uprised it and made it so up. I don't even know what to call it. So public and so like invested.
I see. So try from that description that Christian laid out. Where would you say that you lie?
I would say I see it as something that's I don't know. I don't quite see it like that, but I definitely see where you're coming from. I guess I'm more. I see it as a subjective thing. Like good and evil don't actually exist.
Yeah.
It's just
It's like a moralistic thing.
Yeah. It's all culturally on how you apply it. You know. And also see it as, you know, it can be something that's multifaceted, because you can look at something and say it's evil, the act itself, but you also got to look at intentions. You know?
That's true.
But intentions don't make an act alone, because if someone continuously did something and their intentions were bad, but that thing turned out to be something good, then I think the whole of it, people would look at that person as a good person, you know, regardless of their intentions.
Yeah.
I can't remember this dude's name. I was listening to a podcast and it was weird. It was a really weird story about they called him the real life superhero. Charles Bronson was it Charles Bronson? One of the old actors. He had like a movie based on him, but essentially this guy was a private detective. And a lot, you know, he had these really amazing, over the top, incredible stories. You know, 13 people tried to, you know, I've had 13 assassination attempts on my life. He had hooks for hands.
Wow.
Crazy shit. Yeah, like he had an accident. And so this newspaper did a piece on him and found out, you know, all these lies that he was telling. You know, he never had his aviation license. He never, you know, he was never enlisted in the military. All of these things. And then the podcast that I was listening to was doing I think it was like 30 or 40 years later from that newspaper, and the guy's still kicking.
Yeah.
Amazingly.
Really?
But yeah, it's still doing private eye investigations. And, you know, he has like this whole elaborate setup. Like when she came to his office, he was sitting on the couch reading a newspaper, and then he walked from the left side, and turns out that the person on the couch was just a dummy, and he puts it there with the newspaper for people who try to make assassination attempts on his life.
Wow.
Yeah, it's wild. And then he's like, yo, I put that mannequin in a limo, and whenever I travel, I put it on the other side of the state, the other side of the country, so people are looking for me. Like, it's really like crazy. So
What's this guy's name again?
I'll look it up.
Charles.
It's something Arms, something like that. But anyway, yeah. So she brought up the article, and he kicks her out. He cuts the interview short. Whatever. But, you know, the people that he grew up around, they don't care about any of that, because the work that he did outside of that, like he would drive people to go and vote, just little things like that.
Yeah.
Like that made him an actual hero, and not, you know, this fluff that he puts forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's so weird to me. Special guest.
Special guest.
No, it's so weird to me. And that when you, I don't know, I guess bringing it back to the subject, it's like you think about what people lie about and how they lie. Essentially, lies are bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think the intention behind the lie, because he had that accident, was to sort of push him forward and inflate him so he could do those little things.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, is he good or is he evil because he lied? You know?
I mean, it sounds like he's a pretty neutral guy. It sounds like he just kind of inflated his own, I don't know, history that much more.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would say if he wasn't like deliberately doing anything to like harm others or himself.
I mean, I
then-
think he actually stole somebody's identity.
Yeah.
but that's another thing. I'll look up that, but it was a really amazing
I
story.
don't even know. It's an odd thing. Because let's say he was like it depends on the scale. But then like using violence or using actions in relation to their scale and impact, I don't think is like a perfect model in terms of like, is it good or is it evil? Because like, let's say it was just like, oh yeah, he stole like one person's identity or whatever. So it's like, okay, so it's just one. But then like, let's say like he was like in charge of a nation. Now he's just like a nation leader lying, making like fake things, having mannequins like assassination attempts and the same thing. Then it's just like,
So you're
So it
saying
depends.
that scale?
it depends on your scale has an impact in your power and stuff. And well, like your power scales up, and so like the gravity of your actions is a little bit more.
But he was well known, so he did have influence. He
Yeah,
may
he
not have
had
had the
influence.
influence on the nation. So I mean, I don't know. Thinking about the scale thing, we all have influence in our lives. We all
Yeah.
know people in the way we speak and the way we do things.
Yeah, we have, like,
influence those
agency.
people around us. So I don't know. I don't know if like the scale, because that's like saying, oh, it's when you hear about tragedy, it's like only one person died. Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
or
like-
as opposed to like 100 people died, which is
Right.
still.
But I feel
which
like,
is a weird thing too.
and also I think like I think also it's just a human thing. Like once you reach a certain number of people that like just are not like in a tragic event, like your mind just can't fathom that many people.
Yeah.
So it's just like, oh my gosh, like this thing. So then you kind of like, I feel like that's a comment to how we interpret like news and information too, in the sense that like, oh my gosh, like 2 people died at this thing. It feels more gravity than like 1,000 people died at
Yeah,
this
it
thing.
feels more relatable.
It
Like,
feels
how
more,
many-
more related. Because can
At
you
what
even
point
say,
are we around like 1,000 people?
yeah,
every
like
day?
if
Yeah.
it's still like a lot. But like the 1 or 2 people, it feels like, oh my gosh, I could have known them. But like 1,000 people, you can't even imagine 1,000 people in a setting.
Yeah,
Usually,
usually.
I mean, what do y'all think of like, I guess, good and evil in terms of like a religious sense? 'Cause I feel
But
like
wait! You didn't give your take on
oh yeah.
what I was about to call you Lucas. What Sage was saying about like his sort of definition. You didn't really give yours.
I mean, I think that it's pretty accurate. I mean, I like what you said in terms of, again, it's just kind of like the vacancy of
Yeah.
like good energy, good presence. But yeah, I mean that's interesting because again, I think that kind of like has religious ties in like in an indirect way, being like kind of like the darkness is the vacancy of the light or the lack of like the light. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And I guess you could put that metaphorically, but I think that's good. I mean, and I think that in some varying degree, I think that they coexist. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I think that
Like the duality of it.
exactly. And I mean, yeah, and I was thinking about this even just before we recorded, but it's like just like, yeah, everything has that sense of duality down to like, again, something is like fundamental as good and evil. I mean, yeah, we have 2 sides of our brain, 2 hands, 2 eyes.
Yeah, bilateral
Yeah, there's
symmetry
good,
is
there's
it.
bad, like yeah, really everything. But no, I think that I would agree with that. So yeah, I mean, I guess I would have to like divulge into my own kind of viewpoint, but
Yeah.
more or less, I agree with you, say for sure.
Okay.
So-
More so leaning into, I agree.
So by definition, would you say just life and presence itself is good?
Yeah, I had this like kind of this like thought experiment that like I've been tossing to some people.
Okay.
It's like, let's say you're in a situation, right, and there was like nothing else in like the universe except for yourself, right? So, and then would you elect to create the universe, or would you just kind of just exist in the void for a little bit, or just exist in yourself? Most people would like to like create something. So it's kind of like you create something, and that like out of like the, because basically like I was using that as like a kind of thing to like understand why there's like, I think we spoke about it before, like why there's like loneliness and like a lot of the things that we experience. And so like if you're in a position, right, like that you could create everything, but you know it's a part of yourself, so like you still like are still alone, even though you're filled with all these different versions and iterations and modes of existence. Kind of just like permeates through, and then like as a byproduct of making like that, you have instances where there's a lack of you in a space, or like a lack of something in a space. So like then that informs and creates its own entity or like expression of existing. I guess it's kind of hard to explain because it kind of gets kind of heady.
No,
But-
I was following you. Yeah.
Okay, so by that definition, would the opposite of life be evil, like death? If it's
No,
sort of a,
death is inherent to life, because there's a start. Everything has a start. Everything has started and has ended already.
Whoa.
In the sense that is back to the definition of oneness. Like time is not a thing; it's just a measurement of actions that already happened within the stream of things.
That's hard to kind of fully grasp that everything.
It's
has
kind of
already
like
happened.
we're in this room right now, but simultaneously there's like somebody outside this room in like, I don't know, California doing something. And then somebody, even though they're not being perceived, we're all running concurrently and simultaneously.
Yeah.
So
True.
imagine that, but with the timeline of your life. So like I'm being born at the same moment as one iteration of me is dying at the same moment. So it's kind
One
of like
iteration just being some random person on the planet.
one iteration in the sense that like every choice, if you're using many worlds theory, every choice is a different universe. So you have two systems going on. You have every time you make a choice, something splits into a perceivable thing, and then it's like an infinity within an infinity. So you have the smaller infinity, which is every choice you make splits into a different universe, right? That can happen infinite amount of times, whether I raise my hand up, whether I raise my hand down. There's a lot of iterations of that. But there's also and that creates the various branches. And then you have the different infinity, which is like all the different people that has that happen to. So that's another infinity that's running simultaneously with your infinity. And then you have the final infinity, which is like the different like big branch leaps in time. And so like you have multiple multiverses, kind of like type of thing like that.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's just like scaling. And then so yeah, if you're looking at it from like a different perspective, it's like in relation to good and evil, how can you it's kind of relativistic in the sense, which I feel like is a good thing to understand, but also not something to rely on, in the sense like it's good to understand the relativist thing, like, hey, there's like a million things happening, so like why am I making this choice in the thing? Well, it goes back to like the influence that you have, like you have in the microcosm of your life that you are aware of and like are perceiving, you're able to have a lot of influence and a lot of like power in the stuff that you do. So like that informs and guides like a lot, and a lot of the good and the bad.
So how does one live good? What I
Well-
mean by good is the opposite of evil.
Yeah, I guess my kind of my
'Cause-
thoughts on it would be like acting in a way that creates fullness or continues the fullness of being a person, like just existing.
And you know what's like what's really dawned on me like the last year personally is just that like, dude, a lot of this stuff like directly ties into like religious like affairs.
Yeah.
And I mean almost like not verbatim but very, very closely saying, in other words, like stuff that's like from the Bible. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
at least from like the rough bit of research that I've done like within the last year. I mean, just the other day, like I read this piece of scripture that said something to the effect of like literally what you just said. Like, I mean, yeah, like something along the lines of, you know, think about things or do things that bring joy, that bring peace, that bring love, that bring fulfillment, that bring, you know, all of those elements. You know what I mean? And they just seem to be like bound by like that old scripture or something. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like to me, that's just like a huge kind of like light bulb moment, because it's like, wow, how did they know all of this back then? Like these things that like transcend time. You know what I mean? Like these fundamental truths. Whether you believe in one religion or the other, it's like, man, this is really powerful stuff. You know what I mean? Like it.
I think it's just life in general. Like even at the most microscopic scale, like I feel like life is just striving towards something, and that's kind of like it informs us as like creatures that are made of multiple cells. But even on the most smallest cellular level, it like a plant reaches for like a person reaches for another person.
Right.
Even in like that famous painting, we reach for a connection to something.
Oh wow.
It's like
Michelangelo.
Yeah, the Michelangelo. It's like it is always a striving. The planets and everything strive towards each other. They orbit each other. Try to
That
get
would
closer.
almost tie into your theory that it's good, that is the natural kind of basis of which everything operates, because you're striving for
like
the light as the plant. You're striving for God as Adam.
Yeah, or like even if you're looking, but there's like a thing where like human beings are like just inherently like it's religion is just like the doctrine and ideology that you follow or like that you create to understand some of like our like impulses, and then it can be used as a method of control or a method of salvation. So if you were a tribal society, right, you create a religion. Hey, we do this sacrifice, we do this ritual at the time to honor this type of time, to maybe give us good fortune for this era, right? And then it also is just like at nighttime, there's like this type of things and these demons out, so don't stay at night. So it's a system of control in the sense that it allows for people to rejoice, have joyful events, but also keeps people in house, in safe, in an environment, which is a part of the development of people. Because now people in a society are like, okay, we have a unifying thing that we all believe, and now it allows us to operate within a certain perimeter rules, and it allows us to grow and like strive and have a better likelihood of surviving.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm to me personally, I have like a hard time, I guess, navigating away from like good and evil without thinking of like biblical kind of
I feel like it's a good framework.
literature. Yeah, and I think that's a great point. That I think it's like a really clear and concise like framework in order to kind of hash it out, whether you like believe in, again, one thing or the other. But that's something that's really kind of like shocked me lately, is just like, because I mean, as a kid, like, and I haven't read the Bible all the way through, but I've like flipped through certain tidbits like throughout the last year, and it's just like, wow, like this stuff is really potent in terms of just kind of giving you an idea of kind of which way to go. You know what I mean? And it's like you read it, you kind of interpret it, and then you apply it to your own life. And I think whenever you read it and again correctly apply it outward, then you kind of like bear that fruit of like prosperity and like peace, and again all those other things, goodness again that we had mentioned. And I think it's just kind of fascinating that if you like take that, apply it, then like the output of the input is beneficial, and it's like good, which it kind of sets out for. But I guess also I would like to know, like, I mean, both of y'all come from a somewhat religious background, and like in what ways does that kind of like reflect within y'all's perspective of good and evil?
You want to go first, Trent?
Sure.
Let's hear it.
I don't know. I'm gonna push past religion because I didn't come into the church until I was a little older.
Okay.
Until I was like in high school. If we're thinking of, if we're speaking of things, structures, I guess, to help guide us to, what we believe is good, then, other than, I mean, religion was kind of always there, and the idea of God and all that stuff was kind of always there in the background, and always guided by my parents and people around me. But I would say there were two things which I sort of gained my moral compass from.
Marvel Comics.
You already know comic
Really?
books. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, wow.
No, but comic books, I feel like comic books my dad said something similar. Like comic books were a good archetype for dealing and juggling with deep philosophical topics in a very
Absolutely.
opening thing.
They are the modern Greek gods.
Oh,
They
wow.
are
So modern
an
mythology.
interpretation. Yeah, modern mythology. They're the modern interpretation of that because they're these beings with all these great powers, and they can do all these crazy things, but they still have all these internal struggles. You know, they still fall short. You know, which is what basically what Greek mythology was. But anyway, comic books, as you said, and wrestling.
Wow.
'Cause I used to watch a lot of wrestling, and back in like the golden age, it was like there was always a clear cut good and evil. You know, back before the Attitude Era, you know, it was always this person is here, so they're good, and then this person's standing over here, so they must be evil because they're doing all this. And it was always, eat your vegetables, listen to your parents, drink your milk, and all that.
Yeah.
Although a lot of that's back then, some of it was a little sexist, a little racist.
Yeah.
You know,
Who'd have thought?
But I mean, those are kind of the bases, the basey.
Yeah.
The base,
The basis. Yeah.
the basis, whatever. The basis.
The basis.
The
Shout out
basis of shout out to Thundercat. The basis of where I get sort of my ideas and where all that sort of stems from, which I don't know. And in some ways I may have a complex about it, and that may also stem from me being the youngest, because I always feel like, or at least people try to tell me that I'm always trying to save someone. You know,
Yeah.
like I always try to do what I feel is right. Even
That's exhausting, dude.
It
I've been
is.
practicing
Yeah.
that lately, and it is exhausting.
and it's always, and a lot of times it's at a
disadvantage.
detriment. Yeah, like
That's pretty true,
You
dude.
lose a lot of yourself doing that, and I think at that point it might not be good anymore.
Yeah.
Because you can't, if you don't have anything left for yourself, then you can't genuinely give.
Sure.
So at some point you have to say no to the person with their hand out, which feels wrong.
Right.
But
Yeah.
Wasn't
you
that like a skit in Kendrick Lamar's album? I remember you mentioned about how like the guy that he didn't give money to was God.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, for the Pimp a Butterfly.
Yeah,
It's
I
also
was
a
thinking
story
about
in the
that
Bible.
Yeah, it's
Is it really?
Yeah, that's a story in the Bible. So he used,
Wow,
he used
see,
that.
I
as a
didn't even know
reference.
that. That's,
Yeah, but also I
What's
wanted
the story
to
in
like,
the Bible?
It's like there was somebody who was waiting for God, and then like three random strangers, and they were waiting for God, and they had food for them. I think I
Yeah,
I
and
said
like-
this on one of the episodes, and I still haven't looked it up. So forgive me if I get it wrong. But like three random strangers come and ask for, say, hey, do you have anything? Can you spare anything? No, I'm saving this for Jesus or whatever.
Oh,
and then,
wow.
And then like when Jesus finally shows up, he's like, yo, I came by 3 times and you didn't help me out. Like he was those 3 people. That was like the big.
It's basically
reveal.
like the lesson is like he's present within other people, and like he can take any form.
And see, those
And that's-
stories are just so, I mean, dude, it's like, I mean, it's
A
incredible writing. You know
a
what I
lot-
mean?
yeah.
And like, just like the parable of everything is, I mean, to me, it's like just, I mean, it's really fascinating stuff, especially because I'm
I loved
30
that
years
one.
old and I just like really kind of tapped into that to understand that. You know what I mean? And just, I don't know. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, and a lot of it. The thing is, though, I want to speak towards it since we're talking about like a lot of religious things.
Yeah.
A lot of like
speak on it, Sage.
a lot of the religious things that like we come familiar with as like a culture is like a lot of it is dealing with just the way that like Western, I'm gonna get into hot done, but like Western culture and like thing was kind of just in a missionary sense was kind of spread in an evil way.
Definitely.
In the sense that like people that had local religions and everything or tribal religions were seen as something that needed to be converted into the dominant Western Christianity type of thing, whether it be like conquistadors coming over and imperializing them. So the act of bringing the religion itself and like the methods that were used were evil. However, in a present and modern era, it allows us to inform some of our ways that we can have discussions about religion, but it also puts a bias in terms of what religions we're able and more susceptible to knowing
Sure.
and wanting to understand.
And that's something that's always like tripped me up. And I think that's part of like a fraction of my like kind of growing interest with like religion as a whole is just that it's like there's so much, I mean, through like
So much
thousands of
baggage.
years, yeah, and just so much like different variations and like versions and leaders and ideologies and everything. But like that's another element too, is like, dude, how could like a slave owner or something like be a devout Christian? Or how is, you know, in the Spanish Acquisition or whatever, like wiping out all of these people? Like, how do you do that from, you know, like leading with the righteous mind of like, oh, this
Yeah.
is like the work of God? Like,
People-
how
I feel
how
like
do
it's
you
the
do
same
that?
wrestling type of mentality. I'm good because I'm over here.
Yeah,
You're bad
absolutely.
because you're over there.
People rationalize.
And
they
so
find
they
reasons
But
to
like,
rationalize
where
justify it.
in Scripture are you able to rationalize that? Because
So-
like, there's no way that you can like read through the line. Well, maybe there is.
Well,
Obviously, but
a lot of some of the things that like for slave owners, from what I remember, was they quoted the book of Genesis and Noah, and it was one of the sons he had. It was some type of thing where like the father or like Noah had said, "Don't come into this thing," and then one of them accidentally like walked in, and then he became like the cursed son and cursed lineage, and then they said that people of darker skin were that cursed lineage, and so
Really?
like yeah, it was some type of theory and that type of thing, and using that to kind of justify
because
some of the things.
And I remember, I mean, that really dawned on me. I remember I read the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, and just like the contempt that he had for his slave master or whatever. He's just like the contradiction of what you preach, you know, every Sunday devoutly versus like how you treat your common man is just. He's like, I'll never get it, which is
Yeah, even
I mean,
in
just
the,
beyond fucking interesting.
even for like the writings in I think it was the Declaration of Independence. Every man is equal, and just Jefferson writing that while he had slaves
Yeah,
is like insanity. Like
It is.
like that's just such a terrible like
Throw a fucking chair insanity.
yeah, like it was just such a thing. And it's crazy how a lot of is very interesting in terms of how good and evil are perceived institutionally, and how religious practices in different communities have different meanings. Because for slaves that, or like enslaved people that were brought over on ships, it wasn't like their natural or like their original form of like religiosity, but they soon like embraced it. Like, let's say like you have a tribal religion, right? But then you're kind of like enslaved, you're brought over, and then as the progression of time goes over, they teach you like you're just kind of invited into the Christianity or like some type of Protestantism, and then you have your own version of Protestantism, and they're not really allowed to read from the Bible, and they kind of just go forward and just kind of hear of it, and then they have like spirituals, and they have some ways to like communicate and have different things in that nature, and then they form their own version or interpretation of the same religious practices of praying to like a deity, right? But one interpretation allows for the enslavement of another, and one allows for the salvation and the eventual freeing of another group while using the same text. So I feel like in relation to good and evil, it's a lot of it comes to our personal bias in terms of determining like moralistically what is good and evil versus, because there's a moralistic good and evil, and then there's actual like not objective, because nothing is objective in that type of like in this type of framework, but like the subjective nature and the differences in the perspective. So like the slave owner in that sense would be feeling justified because he's providing a service, he's gating the crops and everything and doing everything to like economically produce them for the environment in the face of like their institution of things, and then they pray for like continuing of that, while the enslaved people were just preaching and trying to like understand and trying to reach salvation to see a freedom that was like for them, like one, nobody should be enslaved, but like something that they just saw as like a hopefulness in like a greater day and a condition other than themselves, other than what they were experiencing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it can be. It's not right, but it can be. Well, I don't want to say that. All right.
Say it.
It can.
It's hard to
And
phrase
elaborate.
I was gonna say it can be objective. I mean,
No,
you
no, no.
can-
It's
'cause you
objective
can,
that it
put
was wrong.
You could like put check boxes here. Okay, so you did this. Boom, you're automatically evil. Like you're a rapist. Boom, you're automatically evil.
Yeah.
You know, which is but it's full of contradiction. No, what I was gonna say was pretty much the same you were saying, but just a less eloquent way of saying it. No, when I think about how people sort of how you could subscribe to the doctrine and still own slaves, it's like the simplest form I could relate it to is like at work.
Yeah.
Like
What do you mean?
there are rules at work. Hey, don't do this, right? Like
Don't steal. Oh, sorry. Never mind.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta give a
wax.
lot of shout outs at the end of this episode to the people at my jobs. But so like we have rules, right? You can only drink water on the floor.
Yeah.
But people bring Starbucks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they justify that by, I need Starbucks to function. I'm special because this, and this. I know we're not supposed to have it, but for me, it's essential. So people tend to take, like you said, their personal bias and say, yeah, I know I'm not supposed to have this, but
Yeah.
It's me.
I'm different. Yeah,
But
it's
also-
me. But
but-
nobody else can do it. But I'm.
But that's also an interesting thing because why have that rule?
Well, go to it because people leave drinks and stuff all over the place, and also like they'll keep it like on the floor or something, and somebody will walk by and spill it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? So that's why. And it's not like I mean, it can be bad, but it's not like a good or bad thing. But it's just something I was
It's
using
evil.
as an
Yeah.
example of someone, subscribing to a doctrine, but making an exception,
Yeah.
So making an exception to doing things that might be, evil. Like that was like the simplest form. That was
Yeah.
the immediate thought. I think about work way too much.
Because sometimes I think evil acts or some things are perceived as evil but are not inherently evil. It's just that the rules dictate them to be evil
Yeah,
sometimes.
absolutely.
In the sense that like the original rule itself had an agenda towards something.
So,
So
how,
kind of like when you take a photo, like I was saying before, it automatically has something that it has to say just by the act of taking it. Same thing with like
it
rules.
becomes exploitive. Yeah.
Yeah,
in a
it's same
way.
thing with like a rule to like not be in this area is something that like why is that rule there? And it's just like then you look into the original origins of something, and that's what I tend to do because I feel like the original intention or stated intention of anything is typically it allows you to understand better why we face the current iteration of that thing. So like let's say I don't know, pick like something that's like random.
Like a rule?
Yeah, like a rule that we have other than like something like murder 'cause, like, that's
No loitering.
yeah, so no loitering. Okay, so the original thing was like, well, no loitering. What is the stated intention of the thing? They don't want you to be in a public space for more than too long. But why? Because it's a public space. So how can you loiter in a public space? Well, when you look at it, it's just like, well, they kind of implicitly want people to not really congregate or like use the environment in that type of sense. So you're seeing as like, and also for vagrancy, if someone has no place to stay, then let's say someone comes as an enforcer of the law, now they can enforce no loitering to a person that's already in a disadvantaged position that has no home or has nowhere else. So what is the no loitering for? It's for the people that have no home, so that they can give them a ticket, so that they could access the private area, so that the problem of homelessness is not seen or addressed. So then you think like, why? So then you apply that to different things
Shouts out to
around you.
Eric Adams.
Yeah. So then you
Wow.
no comment. No comment.
Now, speaking of evil, the first thing he said is getting office. I'm gonna get rid of homelessness on the train.
Yeah.
What?
See, like that action in itself.
swinging.
Yeah, that action is
that thing.
I want to get rid of homelessness
No
on the
ads.
train, right? It sounds
Yeah.
nice. Like, oh yeah, maybe it sounds nice in the beginning, but what does that entail?
Yeah, like there's so much. That's like, yeah. That's just
See,
such a lofty,
Such a lofty
yeah.
thing. Like it sounds nice, but a lot of times, and that's the thing with evil, in the sense that it can be a lofty thing, but when you look at it for under a microscope, or like look at some of the very implicit and subtle ways that it's very deceptive, because I feel like with evil, it has to announce itself. Like it has to be at least in your purview of something that can happen. It's just like you have to put the attention to detail to kind of get to the nitty gritty of it.
what like conclusion that this is evil.
Yeah, and at least in the modern world, because a lot of the evils are, there's a philosopher. His name is Michel Foucault, and he talks about how peacetime is just like, it's the same as war. It's just through institutions and do different things until the next all-out war violence breaks out. In the sense that like a jail space is a prison, right? Obvious. But the school in his eyes is also a prison. You have the wardens, who are the teachers. You have this thing that's going to be kind of perpetuated through this sense, and he kind of goes more in depth and kind of looks at institutions, and kind of basically his main thesis is like, this is kind of like a prison, and kind of uses the prison as just a system in which you're kind of trapped into certain environmental behaviors and thoughts that are allowed within a specific space.
So, to kind of play off of that a little bit, I mean, given I guess it obviously has its kind of subjective overtones of good and evil, but how would y'all say y'all go about navigating through life? Is there any compass of good and evil, or more so like
I
bad,
feel like
good, or anything like that? I mean, if you ever find yourself leaning into more one side or the other, do you always like hit equilibrium, or is there like a certain tactic you do to always get yourself back on track?
I don't know.
If you're leaning into like shit you're not into, like, you know, whatever, how do you bring yourself back? And again, is it even a compass of good and evil, or what's your kind of self-regulation process like?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I was talking with shout out Jules from the X. I was talking to him, having a conversation. But
Big ups.
yeah, I was talking to him, and we had this kind of deepish conversation, and it was just like, how do you lead your life, essentially? And I was like, if, God forbid, like, if things were to kind of end, I would have like no regrets, because every choice that I made throughout life has been something of my own agency, of my own volition, and I did it with thought and intention, and I try to do it as purely as possible.
Oh, wow.
So that's kind of like how I try to lead, like, with life in terms of goodness, because good and evil is hard to measure up through a point system. As like, I watched this show called The Good Place, and they talk about, like, they juggle a lot of philosophies, and it's really cool entry level show for like a lot of stuff that we're talking about. But it had like this good thought experiment. Let's say you buy flowers for your mom. That's a good act. But let's say you did that, or like you pick flowers for your mom in like the medieval times, right? The act of picking the flower, you may have killed the plant, but like the expression of like love through a flower is pretty good. But if you were to go grab some flowers at the store, and the store happened to use unauthorized migrant labor, are you at fault for the giving
I was gonna
that?
make that
like,
point. Damn
like,
it.
like, are you at fault for doing the same action So like, but the genealogy, just because of the way that, well, not the genealogy, but like the way that the progression of events that allow the modern world to function,
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really allow the same type of clear cut moralistic good bad. It's like you have to kind of evaluate, because how much can one person do for someone that's so far away when you yourself are dealing with a lot of the issues too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's another thing that's subjective. I think it's also, with things like that, it's also an issue of knowing. It's like, once you know, how do you go about acting afterwards?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you continue to buy flowers and say, fuck it, I don't know these people? Or do you do your best to bring awareness to it? Or do you protest, stand outside the gift shop with a sign,
Don't buy these flowers.
Yeah. Or have, and that was I don't know if I made this point on the podcast, but that was a sort of a thing back in the day with Saul Williams, where Nike had the whole sweatshop thing, and then they used one of his songs. They used one of his songs for a commercial, and then I believe he questioned them, and then and then from there it like started a conversation between him and Nike, and they started the whole website Nike/responsibility, I think, and then he got invited to the factories to actually see how they were made and how they were, going through and cleaning up stuff. So I mean, I think with, like I said, I think with a situation like that, the response is important.
Yeah.
Because you can, because he made the best point in the world. Like, it's easy to learn something like that and be like, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. You're the problem.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed, which would do absolutely nothing. So does that make you evil if you respond in a way that is actually counterproductive? Because his response was to ask questions. He got himself in a position where he could figure out something to do, which was productive.
Certainly.
I feel like good is an active thing that you have to do. Like, good is active, evil is inactive. In the sense that, you see how he went actively and pursued something? It's like striving, it's life.
Mm-hmm.
And then evil was kind of just, maybe kind of just leaving it as is, status quo, or maybe just like having a lack of action.
And
you can do things and still, I think, and still not have any results.
I see what you're saying though. Honestly, what is that Bible verse about? It's like idle hands is the devil's playground or something like that.
Yeah, like a lack of they was spitting. Yo,
do you know which one I'm talking about?
No, I never heard that one, but that is spitting.
What is it, Trent?
Yeah, you said it right. Idle hands are the devil's playground.
Right, which is like, again, and it's just interesting that you keep up, or you keep bringing up these like, important points, and it's like, oh wait, there's actually like something that pertains to that. But I think that's really true, and that, I mean, honestly, that's pretty eye opening. I guess I never really thought of it that way. But
even us right now, just the act of doing the podcast in itself is a striving act, and by doing the striving act, we gain a different power with the microphone. So it's a different responsibility, not to make you guys stress, but it's a different responsibility in terms of how we communicate and talk about subjects.
Yeah, it's true.
Even in relation to good and evil, and what the stated intention and the purpose of what we make.
So, sorry, Trent, his eyes are shifty over here. Let's hear it.
No, continue.
No, I just wanted to know, again, like, my question of, like, how do you go about navigating just life in general? Again, is there a compass of good and evil, or is it, like, right, wrong?
Absolutely. I try to, like Sage, probably not in the exact same way. For one, I try not to live with regrets. I try to make a decision and, and try not to look back on it and wonder what could have. I try to do what I feel is best, which is normally how something makes me feel and then weighing that against my thoughts. What is
Which
what
would be
is
contrary, or
what is
what?
the result of this? Sometimes it is. What is
Okay.
what is the what is going to come of this? How is this going to attribute to my happiness in the long term? How is this going to affect the people around me? Things like that. And I think I normally come up with a pretty good sense of how and where to go. A lot of what I do, I try to be as of service of other people as much as possible. I try to be, God, I try. I try to figure out what people need and help them with that if I feel like it's going towards something that is good or that is positive.
Yeah, you naturally like to help people out.
Yeah, I try. But I think that's the bases of my my moral compass. It's like what makes me feel good, which a lot of times is helping other people and weighing that against how I think about it and how I think it will affect myself and others in the long run. Is it better for them? Will they be better? Things like that. Yeah.
I see.
What about you?
Yeah, Lucas.
Let's see. I mean, yeah, I think it resembles that in some manner for sure. I think that, I mean, whenever, I go based off of feeling. I think that feeling is important, and just trying to look at the end result of it. And also just like doing, I think, what is fundamentally right. I mean, I would say that personally, I really, not that I didn't have a moral compass, so to speak, but I didn't really think about always like doing the right thing for myself and those around me until like more recently in my life. You know what I mean? And I think about now just like, say, mistakes I've made in the past, and then how I think about how I dealt with something in the past versus how I do now. And now when I'm like to act and the way I go about navigating my life is, I would say that, I mean, again, I move based off of feeling, based off of like input and output, and what's just best for the greater good and like everybody that's around me. And what I mean by that is, say something at work about, I work in retail, so I have to work with a wide plethora of people, and it's something even as minute. I mean, we'll get on the microscopic scale of, say there's two different people that need help. One is a pretty young woman who I'm like more than obliged to be like, oh, hey, like chat it up, whatever. I'm a friendly person. I'm a male. I'm straight. I'm going to be psyched to, you know what I mean? I'm happily in a relationship, but damn, I'm digging myself a hole. But, but you know what I mean? I'm more inclined. Okay. What I'm trying to say is that I'm more inclined to be like, oh, like all happy, uppity, the most kind of engaging and helpful that I can be if it's like, you know what I'm saying? Say a pretty girl versus like, say it's like exactly conventionally attractive versus like, say somebody that we'll just say like looks like downtrodden. It's like, it's a man, he's old, say he's like, whatever, you know what I mean? And something that I've been applying since I started my new job is just like, no matter how exhausting it is, like treat that person with the same exact amount of respect. You know what I mean? And that's something that I've thought of is it's like, whether it be a pretty woman or again, like an old woman who like can barely walk, it's like treat them with the same level of enthusiasm, of respect, and of helpfulness that you would across the board. You know what I mean? And
the universality of it.
Exactly. And that isn't specific to work. That's specific to saying good morning to the deli man, or bringing my best game to sewing, or bringing my best game to the podcast. And like, I mean, really, as you said, Christian, again, that was enlightening, because it's like always striving for that thing. And that's what I meant earlier by saying like it's exhausting. You know what I mean? Or seeing somebody that's trying on again, working in retail, 2 different jackets. It's like, I see them from afar. I'm already doing something, but I know that I know in my heart that they need help. Again, something as minute as buying a jacket, and it's like shit. Like I got to do all this stuff. Like do I go help him or do I stay in my own selfish zone? It's like, you know what? Let me just slow it down. Let me put what I'm doing down. Let me go help this individual. You know what I mean? And like that's very, very small. And
It's
that's
those minute things though. Those little things add up.
And those
Absolutely.
things compound too. You know what I mean? And like that's also what I mean by like I'm navigating off of like an input output, because I see like if I do that now, then like I'm helping him, and then that also kind of carries forward the momentum into the next interaction, and then that carries the momentum into like outside of work, and again it's kind of like a compounding sequence of events. But yeah, I would say that's really kind of how I go about navigating, and I think that there's a overarching theme of good and evil, but I think it's also like you can kind of like dilute it down to like right and wrong. And you know, sometimes I make the wrong decision too, you know what I mean? And I don't think that means that I'm evil, but I think that's a natural kind of flaw of like the human psyche and the human ability. But again, I always try to kind of lead off of that compass of like you know when it's the right thing to do, you know what I mean? And it's like regardless of how you feel, it's like pretty much 10 times out of 10 you ought to just do the right thing, you know? And so that's always like regardless of how tired
Shouts
I
out to
am.
Spike Lee.
Did he say that?
He said, "Do the right thing."
Oh, do the
Yeah,
right thing, right.
yeah. I have not seen that one. I'm like, damn.
But yeah, so that's kind of how lately again I've been operating a little bit more, and again it's been like the last 2 years to like a year of my life that I've actually become a lot more conscious of like the decisions I make and how I interact with people, how I interact like interpersonally with myself. You know, I've been doing this really great thing lately. I'm great. No, I'm just kidding. I'm great. That's it.
Sometimes you need to say that.
No,
completely.
but no, this really great thing where it's like, so, self-admittedly, like I like smoking weed. Like that's really kind of like, that's my thing. Like nobody's ever fucking said that before. But I really enjoy smoking weed under certain circumstances. And like lately, late at night, usually I'm not a functioning stoner though. Like I can't smoke and then like go get a haircut, go get lunch with somebody, go, you know, on a date and then go, like I can't do all that shit, but I'm like at night. So anyways, I'll smoke at night, and then like when I'm going to bed, it like allows me to get into this state where like lately I've been doing a lot of self-reflecting, and like I'm able to go, and I think the weed just kind of like, you know, kicks it into like a little bit more of like a deep dive, but I go like way back in my memories, and I just like try to think of like fundamental kind of lessons and experiences and attributes that like led me to where I'm at now. You know what I mean? Even like say that like the conception of like wanting to move to New York, you know what I mean? I can like think back all the way, and I'll like have a memory in like 4th grade, like, man, I remember when I saw Spider-Man, and like, you know, I became like, you know, like enamored with the city, and then I got to explore downtown Dallas, and like, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
it just
was like a
helps me
progression of
understand who I am a lot more. And even like with the mistakes that I've made too, you know, I'm like, man, what led me to that? And I'll think back and I'm like, oh shit, like, you know, this happened, which led to that. And just all types of different things. And again, that only further strengthens like the structure of like how, again, I've been operating more recently, where it's like a lot more conscientious of my actions, of like my outlooks, of my mind state, and things of that nature. So, yeah, again, to sum it up, I mean, it's kind of just thinking a little bit more before I act, and always kind of having like the best intentions for the circumstances whole, like within my crosshairs of action.
That was a good example. I've been doing that, especially working in retail as well. I've been doing that, being more mindful of how I treat people, trying to give the same energy to everyone.
And it's so like, and it really like produces results too, where it's like, yeah, and it's like, it's one thing to like, hey, how are you? Like, you know, fuck, this is my job, I got to do this. But it's also like really giving somebody the time of day to like be heard, be understood, be helped, be like, you know, have a laugh with, like all these little different things. And like it goes way beyond just, you know, having a, you know, a jacket buying moment. I think that, yeah, those things stick with you, and who gives a shit what the brand is or how much you're making or whatever. But yeah, really like creating those instances and those experiences that like somebody remembers, you know what I mean? And I think that that's beneficial, and like that person may have really needed it. Shit, maybe even I really needed it. Just like the dialogue between somebody. So, yeah, that's what I've been, and it's bared fruit. You know, like being more conscientious of myself and like knowing myself a lot more. You know what I mean? I think that that helps me navigate, and like that's something that like, I mean, it's definitely very, very important, and it's something I think to look over, like the knowledge of self, you know? And that almost seems like a kind of airy, like a lofty, like, oh, of course I know myself. I live in this skin with this mind and this brain. Like, of course I know but it's like, do you really know yourself and like know why you make the actions you make and like why you think the way you do? And like, again, that's like whenever I go back late at night, I think I'm able to achieve those understandings of like why it is I do act like that and think like that and so on and so forth. But yeah, so that's kind of how I've been navigating, and again, it just like leads more insights to like, yeah, I guess the nature kind of good and evil. So
Yeah. I like what you said about appearance, and I feel like a lot of times,
what do you mean?
Like not falling into the deceptions of appearance, whether it be like someone that you're more inclined to like help rather than someone else, and just providing the universality of like your kindness, your energy, and everything, despite like how a person appears.
Of
Or, like,
course, yeah.
and like using, and that kind of touches with what I was saying before, like with like the no loitering thing, like in the sense that like the appearance of something may have something other that may be like the actual core essence of something, and doing like it has a positive sense and then it has a negative sense and everything. But oh man, okay.
Oh my.
Oh my.
Oh
Yeah.
boy.
Yeah, we're running close to
So
time.
that was yeah, that was actually interesting. I haven't really vocalized those thoughts, but yeah, it's kind of something that I've been, or
It's
it's
been
definitely
existing
something
in your head and you've never
for
let it out
sure.
into the
But it's
world.
also like kind of like subconscious, so I don't really like even
You don't
verbalize
really,
it in
like,
my head.
structure it
Yeah.
in words. It's just
Right.
kind of there.
And it's like, oh, actually, yeah, that's pretty insightful. And I'm not gonna hold you, like, man, yeah, I've learned like a lot from the parables of like the Bible, which is interesting. And I mean, I'm not like a church going individual, so to speak, you know, just speaking truthfully, but it's like flipping through and reading certain parts, I'm like, wow, that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, if anything, you should try some of like the I think it's called the Vedas. I'm sorry.
What is that?
It's a couple of like Hindu texts and stuff like
Okay.
that. And like just try it, because basically a lot of the religions say same things with different variations or different like critiques or different insights, and doing that to like just broadens like your thing, so then you can just hop into different frameworks of like, oh yeah, this is how culturally this place like looks at things, and it's not so much different from this thing, but it does have like this little slight difference right here,
Right. And that's so interesting
and that
too.
stuff is really fun.
Yeah, and I mean, even predating like the Bible itself, it's like those concepts have still been around. So I mean,
Since
the
before
very
that.
topic on in 2023, I mean, people have been grappling with these ideologies and like fundamental topics like forever. It's really interesting.
Honestly.
I don't know. Maybe it's not our spot to figure it out. That's the conclusion.
Are you saying on this subject we're not supposed to be here?
Yeah,
Is
we're
that
not,
just-
we're not supposed to be here on
Sheesh.
this subject. I think it's time to say the shout outs, I think.
Yeah. Before
Wrapping
that,
this joint up.
before
Oh,
that, I have an update.
Whoa.
I told you part of it. I saw. This is subject aside. This is a little catch up. I saw Captain Fellatio again.
I heard
yeah.
you messaged us. That's crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
I
was,
was
that
like,
was
oh,
fucking
man.
wild.
Perhaps any listeners who are just tuning in, 10-second recap. Who is this guy again?
So we told this like 2 episodes ago.
I think so.
So essentially, I was getting off a train one day, and this random person approached me out of nowhere, trying to get my attention. And we had a back and forth. They complimented me, and then they aggressively offered me fellatio multiple times.
Such a sketchy word.
Broke out
Episode
to
13.
tears, all that. So anyway, this person appeared again from the shadows as I was walking home from work. Caught me slipping once again. I was listening to music,
Boy, lock
and
in.
I was really into it. I was like, "Yo, I fucking love this song."
What
Like,
were
I
you
really-
listening to?
Some Lupe.
Damn, I'm getting predictable. I need to mix it up. I was listening
Hey.
to some Miley Cyrus. No,
Cause a
yeah,
little
some
fiasco.
Lupe. That he has a new song called Rockefeller, y'all, and that shit has like been my anthem lately. But anyway, yeah, this person appears again, and this time he's looking a little more well kept.
Okay.
He still got the bandage on his arm, but his clothes weren't covered in blood.
Okay.
His hair was done. He had like plaits
Okay.
going on, and he had like this red shirt
Leveling up.
and like these really, really short jean shorts. Like they were short.
Oh.
Daisy Dukes.
And this person they were out of breath and covered in sweat, dripping, soaking wet, moist.
Just
Like they
some
just
type
got
of
done
moisture.
running.
Oh.
And they run up to me. It's like, okay, come on, we got to go. I was like, the fuck? And I was like, oh shit, it's this person again. Like I saw him approaching and I was like, shit, it's this person again.
What
This
were you
time-
like? Where was this at? On the
This
street
was-
or at the train?
This was
or-
like I was going across a parking lot of a McDonald's parking lot. It's a
Okay.
big parking lot.
Okay.
And this time it was closer to my apartment.
Okay.
Which is crazy,
Oof.
man. Yeah. And they were like, oh yeah, I just need you to come with me. Come on. I was like, for what? So I need to go get my bag. I was like, what? I was like, yeah, I gotta go get my bag. I gotta, I was like, huh? And then they kept talking and it started to turn into a moment. It's like, $40. It's like, wait, what? It was like, I need you to come with me because I'm afraid. I was like, nah.
So you
if
go with him? No.
Yeah, and then, I got $40. Nah. Then it was. I was like, yo, if you're seriously scared for your life, then call the police. Don't come to me with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
I know. And they're like, okay, $60, and then they started doing like the blowjob motion. I was like,
Oh,
nah,
no,
I'm
no,
out. I
I'm
was like,
good.
I cut it short. I was like, nah, have a good night, leave me alone. And I started walking away like, bro. So I don't know. Next time I'm gonna film this person if I catch them again. I want to film them
Honestly,
and see because
yeah.
it's fucking wild and it's
Oh man.
it's crazy.
Is the intention of filming them good?
As good as it can
yes
be?
and no.
Yeah.
Because
Or is it
I
evil?
want.
Or is
I
it
want.
evil?
It's a little bit of both.
Is it like
It's
the
gonna be good because we're gonna get a laugh at it. I'm gonna laugh at it.
I mean-
bad because we're probably laughing at this person with mental health problems, but
I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't think we would like hold up the phone and everybody's pointing and laughing at
Yeah.
like their issues. But I think if anything, that would be a deterrent from
Yeah.
them in real time from harassing you. Like, dude,
I doubt
I'm
it.
filming you.
I doubt it.
Who knows?
I wouldn't be laughing at like mental illness itself.
Right.
I'm more laughing at the situation, but it's just surreal. I'll probably be a little bit more stern if
Yeah.
I run into the person. Like I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to like put my foot down and be like, yo, like this is the line and this is where you stand.
Yeah.
Don't cross it.
Yeah, no.
Like this is what it's gonna be from here on out. So
Use
we'll
a-
see. I don't think that'll work, but we'll see how it acts. But anyway, yeah, I'm sorry.
Wow.
That was just a little update. I forgot to do that at the beginning of the show. So shout outs, thank
Drugs are
yous.
crazy.
Oh.
Don't do drugs, kids. Drugs are bad.
Shout out to what? Shout out to. I'm gonna say shout out to the Bible. Shout out to the
Shout out to
Bible.
the Bible.
It's on the
and it's multiple
topic
writers.
Yes.
on the topic of good and evil. Shout out to the Bible. All in all, again, I haven't read it through and through. I've read some pretty powerful stuff here and there, and I'm very grateful of the lessons that I've learned from it
Oh.
in my time reading it. So, shout out to the Bible. That's my shout out. And I'm still learning. I'd love to look into what you said as well.
Yeah, I would. I guess for my shout outs, shout out to Hannah Arendt, and she was a philosopher. I just listened to like the Philosophize This podcast. Shout out to Stephen West. But yeah, he did a really good deep dive into her evaluation of. I didn't really get to touch on it that much, even though I wanted to. But basically, like, she talks about the banality of evil, or like the ways in which evil is kind of perpetuated in the systems and stuff like that, and in the modern world. So I touched on it a little bit, but not like explicitly. But like, shout out to her and her theories, and to any woman identifying philosopher or academic, because it's a very hard industry, and but very it's very insightful and deep, and it's very personal, and it informs a lot of it forms a lot of how I view the world and how I think. So thank you to all the academics, all the people that put different forms of thought, different metaphysics, different philosophies, and try to understand the nature of good and evil. And to everyone that navigates through it.
Well said.
Mr. Diz.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, shout out to my boy Patrick. He's been listening every episode.
Really?
Yeah, he's been.
I'd say that's a good act.
Yes, that's a very good act. That's
Shout out, man.
Shouts out to you, Patrick.
Shout out, Patrick.
Shouts out to my best friend David, who I've known since I was like 9 years old, who's been sneak listening to the podcast.
Ooh.
Like, he didn't say
Really?
anything, but he's been listening to it. So shouts out to you if you hear this.
Hey, David.
You bastard. Shouts out to all of the people that did their best to point me in the right direction when I was directionless. You know, to the people that do good in my life and in other lives, people who always taught me to pay it forward. You know, it's not about what you get; it's what you do with it.
Yeah.
You know, giving it out. And I've learned that lesson so many times. Like, there's so many people that are responsible for me being here. Not that my position is like high or great or anything, but any goodness or greatness I have, you know, stems from someone helping me. So shouts out to them.
Love it.
And with that said, this has been our episode, and
Thank you, our good people.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've been a good invisible audience. Peace.